Okay, fourth grade, we are going to make a monochromatic gemstone, okay? So monochromatic means that it's one color, but it has tints and shades that go with that color, so light and dark of that color. We're gonna get a half piece of paper, as always, name and class code on the back. And for your piece of paper, we're gonna turn it over, and we're gonna pay attention to our corners right here, okay? For our corners, what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of make a mark that takes our corner and kind of marks off a triangle shape over here. I want it to be about 3 fingers widths. Maybe for some of you a little bit closer to 2. I think I'm actually gonna do mine 2. Some of you guys will have a little bit smaller fingers than I will, so maybe 3 would work. And then I'm gonna do this for all 4 corners. And what I'm doing here is I'm marking off my corners. We're gonna do what's called an emerald cut for our gemstone. So it's gonna be like a big rectangle, okay? So there's my corners. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna draw a line that comes in from my corners, and I'm angling it in just a little bit. So I want this one to be longer than this line here, okay? And I'm gonna do that for all 4 corners as well. The thing I'm trying to do is I want to try to get it to where my lines angle about the same. Like obviously this one, that space is much shorter than this one. So that tells me that maybe I made mine a little bit too angled on this one. So I'm gonna go back and make them a little bit wider. The other thing I'm trying to do also is the length of my lines. I want them to be about the same length, and mine look like they're about from the tip of my finger to my first big knuckle here, my main knuckle. So I want to try to do that. It's okay if they're not perfect, but that's kind of my goal. If at any point you want to grab a ruler and use a ruler to help you out with that, you can as well. Okay, so now that I've got my corners, they all kind of look like that. Okay, I'm going to draw a line, and I'm going to connect these 2 right here, and this will be a good spot to see if I made my lines come far enough in or not. Like I said, you are welcome to use a ruler if you'd like to. That helps you make your line straight. Go for it. I was gonna say, I can tell that one's not gonna be long enough. Okay. Another thing that I look for too when I'm drawing these lines is these spaces over here. Are they about the same size? If they are, then I'm good. If one's much skinnier and one's much wider, then maybe I need to go back and change my angles a little bit. But like I said, this does not have to be perfect. And then the last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna connect these lines on my 4 corners here, like so, okay? So there I have my gemstone. I'm gonna wait, and these right here are going to end up being cut off, but I'm gonna wait and do that, okay? Now that I have my emerald cut drawn here, now I'm ready to begin painting. For my painting, everybody's going to get an egg carton tray. Some I have are clear, some are more of our traditional styrofoam trays. Either's fine. You're going to have a cup that's got white paint in it, a cup that's got black, not a lot of black, but at least a little, and then 2 spaces of whatever color you choose. You can choose a primary color, a secondary color. Okay, it is your choice, but that's what we'll have. We'll have our paintbrush, a paper towel, and then a cup of water, okay? So first thing I'm gonna start out with is I'm going to paint a part of my paper with my plain color here. You can choose to do the big space in between. You can choose to do these corner pieces, okay? It's up to you, but whatever you choose, if you choose one of these along the outside, you're gonna do all of them that way. So for example, if I chose the corners, I would do all 4 corners in my solid purple, my main color. Or if I did the top space and the bottom space, I would do those the same, okay? It is your choice how you do that, okay? Then after we've painted those with our solid color, then we're gonna get to do a little bit of mixing. And when I mix, anytime I add black to my color, I'm gonna create what's called a shade. If you think of being in the shadows or in the shade, the light around you is darker because you're being blocked by something from the sun or from a light, so it's gonna be darker, so our shade's gonna use black. When we use white with a color, that's where we create a tint. Okay, so we'll have a part of our paper that has our main color. We'll have a part of our paper that has a tint where we have white added, and then we have a part of our paper with shade added where it's got black added. There's a possibility, depending on how you decide to paint, if you're only painting these 2 side ones a tint and you paint these 2 a shade, we could possibly make a second tint or a second shade to finish off our corners or the middle, whichever spaces we have left. Okay, let me show you. Now that we have painted our gemstone to look like a monochromatic gemstone, I have my true color. I have 2 tints, very light and then only a little light. And then I have my shade. I was not happy with my shade earlier. It felt like it was too dark. So I showed how instead of adding the color to the black, you could add black to the color and get a slightly lighter version of that shade. I had hoped it would lighten it a lot more. It did not, but that's okay because as it dried, it did lighten up quite a bit. So I'm okay with that. The next thing I'm gonna add are what are called highlights. This is where the light reflects off the surface of the smooth gemstone. So to create that, we're going to have a little bit of white, and we're gonna use a very small paintbrush. There are some in there that have green handles. They are small, but they're not quite this small. You can still use them. I'm going to show you how to make them appear even smaller. But I know they're older, but I do recommend the orange ones. So when you dip your paintbrush into the white, okay, you're going to dip it and then you're going to gently spin it. Okay. And what that does with spinning is it makes your tip of your paintbrush stay fine instead of being kind of squished or whatever. Okay, so we're going to do some highlights. I definitely want to put some highlights on the top of my gemstone. And when I make my highlights, I try to keep them kind of concentrated in a similar area. Your highlights have to make sense. So if my light is hitting here, anything that kind of has that type of spot where it would hit, I would also do. So for example, I'm going to take my paintbrush here and I'm going to run it down the edge of the top of my gemstone, and sometimes you can rotate your paintbrush and get some more paint. I'm going to do like that. And sometimes gemstones and shiny surfaces, their highlights are kind of broken up, so kind of something like that maybe. Okay, and the other thing I'm going to do for my highlight, so these surfaces here, this one, and this one are all going to slant down away from the top of my gemstone. So if my gemstone, if my light is coming from over here and shining down, that means that anything that would maybe be over on this side of my gemstone also might have a highlight. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to spin my paintbrush, and I also have to think about where I put my lighter color. So for instance, my shade over here of my color probably won't have any highlights because it's darker, so it's probably more in shadow. So I might concentrate my other highlights maybe on these two triangle or corner pieces and maybe my side piece a little. So maybe for my side piece here, I'm gonna have my highlight be here in the center, and you can kind of break them up a little. Okay, it's up to you. You don't have to do all over. You can just do a few spots. And then maybe on my corner pieces, I'll actually have a little bit of a highlight there. And then same for this one. Maybe something like that. Okay, so there are my highlights in my gemstone. Okay, the last thing that we're going to do is we are going to get a large permanent marker. I have had these forever. I'm hoping they still work well. I haven't used them in several years, but they've all been sitting in this bucket upside down. So hopefully gravity will help us and has pulled all the ink down to the surface of our tip. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go over our edges here, kind of give them a crisp edge as well. If these don't work, we'll just use our regular Sharpies, but I'd like to use these if possible. So let's do that now. The other thing you wanna make sure before I do this is you wanna make sure your highlights are dry. Okay, so now that I have my picture completely painted, I have put on the highlights and I have taken my black permanent marker and gone over my edges. I'm gonna take my scissors here and I'm gonna cut off my triangle pieces on my corners. Just like so. And there is my beautiful gemstone.